Good morning. I would like to begin by welcoming a visiting clergy, the Reverend Dr. Peggy Price, who was the presenting minister yesterday at Reverend Tara's ordination. There she is. Welcome. And let's see. Our affirmation today is, why don't you read it with me? I seek the common good. And our topic for today is relaxing and settling the mind. And I told you a couple of weeks ago that the Jewish festival of Purim took place in this month. And this month is Women's History Month. So I'm going to tell you a story from the Bible that pulls this all together. It's big. It's a big story, so you have to listen fast. Okay? This is how it starts. It's all going to work out anyway, no matter what you decide to do. That's what Mordecai told Esther when he had attempted to send her out to save a nation, and she hesitated. Now, you may not know who I'm talking about, unless, of course, you had a biblical upbringing or if you grew up in a Jewish household. Then you would know I'm talking about one of the most beloved stories of the Jewish tradition, Purim, and it's represented in the book of Esther, and it's a story about very difficult choices. It's a story about betrayal. It's a story about ego running out of control. It's a story about seeking the common good beyond my personal need. It's a story about settling the mind before acting. I told you. Now, here's my version of the story as best as I know it. Picture the scene. Once upon a time, many thousands of years ago, the Persians ruled everything, absolutely everything, the entire world, more than any superpower before them had ever ruled. Now, the king at the time, the Persian king, his name is absolutely impossible, Ahasuerus or Xerxes or Ahasuerus. We'll call him the king. He governed this empire that stretched, well, from India all the way through to Ethiopia. It was big. It was huge. And he was very, very powerful. And we come into his story right at the time that he was hosting an event for all of the important people of the entire kingdom, like, political networking. And it's something like 180-day long event followed by a 7-day banquet. He must have been a religious scientist. I mean, that's a lot of partying to do. His wife, the Queen Vashti, well, she's remembered, it's complicated, both as a villain because of the way she treated people in her household, but also as a kind of hero, because with a single act of defiance, she caused every woman to ask the question we still ask today. Why? Why in the most powerful nation on the earth do we treat women the way we do? Now, here is how it happened. See, she was busy with her own banquet with the women of the kingdom because they couldn't party with the men. It wasn't allowed. And this is what it says in the book. When the heart of the king was merry with wine, you know what that means. Blotto, drunk. He calls for her. And he calls for the queen to come wearing her crown only. Now, not only does he want to show off his wealth and he wants to show off her beauty. Look, he could have commanded her. He could have sent soldiers to drag her in, but he didn't. He needed her to be obedient to show his dominance and prowess. But Queen Vashti declined to come Yeah, she said no. Whoa. He gets so mad. He's so mad. He doesn't know what to do. He even sobers up. He's never had to deal with this before. This has never happened for him. He doesn't know what no means. Nothing prepared him for this. There's nothing in the How to Be a King manual. There's nothing in the law of the land that explains to him how to deal with this. So he calls together all the lawmakers, men, to ask, what should I do? One advisor, he says, well, this is very serious in nature. Not only has Queen Vashti done the king wrong, but she has also wronged all of the men of the kingdom. You know why? Because now all the women are watching, and she will cause all of the women of the kingdom to look upon their men with contempt and be disobedient. Yeah. Something must be done. I was reading this and I thought yesterday of a science of mind teaching, when I thought about her saying no. I thought about it, how if one person knows their power, everyone is impacted by it, When one person says no to injustice, it emboldens everyone else, even if it takes centuries. It's the trickle-up method. Yeah. So, the lawmakers give him advice. They say, you need to write a law, a new law. Write a law that says the Queen Vashti can no longer come before the king. You know what that means? She can't enter his bedchamber. She can't be intimate with him. He writes the law. She was probably delighted. Frankly, no. But sadly, it is the end of the story for Queen Vashti. The hero and the villain at the same. A hero because she was defiant in the face of oppression. She refused to comply with an unjust command. Now, I was thinking about that as I read in the news that the Kingdom of Brunei is passing a law that will go into effect on Wednesday. And it allows adulterous women and homosexuals to be stoned to death. Yeah. And it got me to thinking about today in Saudi Arabia how male guardianship is still a thing that strictly, severely limits the movement and freedom of women, and how women who stand up against it are thrown into prison. And I thought about that. I thought about to refuse to obey is what Vashti did. And in that regard, she was a precursor of civil disobedience. Now, she's also considered to be a villain, and it's quite complicated. A villain, well, because she treated the Jewish girls in her household in the same way that the king was treating her. Whoa, it's a sober reminder, for me to extend the dignity and regard that I wish for myself to other people, because no one is above the spiritual law of cause and effect. No one. Anyway, important note. The king writes that law, and a king's law cannot be revoked. That's the way of it. The king, when the word is spoken, it's law, it's final. He can't change his mind. Can you imagine you and me when we're saying our prayers and saying our affirmations, if we considered the words that came out of our mouth with the same weight and conviction and sureness? It might give new meaning to that phrase. And so it is. Right? Not. And maybe it is. Anyway, now he's got no queen. He has to replace her. And so the king has what is, I guess, the most polite way to say it is an international beauty contest, a pageant, like Miss Universe, And this is where we get to meet two new characters in the story, Mordecai and Esther. And there's a relationship between them. I'm going to call Mordecai Esther's cousin. You see, I think she's an orphan, and she's the daughter of his uncle, something like that. And according to Jewish law, an orphan and a widow must be taken care of by the next of kin, no matter how distant, and forever. Yeah, so he's a kind of father figure almost, a protector, and he is looking out for her. And even though the Jews were scattered across the kingdom in the previous reign by the Babylonians, many of them still were very devout and connected to their faith tradition. And such a man was Mordecai, and such a woman was Esther. So he sees an opportunity for her. And he sends Esther to participate in the Miss Universe pageant. Yeah. But he tells her not to reveal that she is Jewish. Why? Well, because they're a captured people. Maybe they would think less of her. Maybe if they realized she was Jewish, they would treat her poorly like Queen Vashti did. It's not really said why, even though he himself is out. He's Jewish. He advises her not to tell that she's Jewish. Now, the women of the kingdom are given a year to prepare before they go before the king to see if they can be selected to be the queen. And each woman is granted anything they want to take with them to make themselves give an advantage to win favor with the king. And this is where we get a bit of an insight into Esther. She had a sense of self. She knew who she was. Because when they asked her, "What do you want?" she says, "Nothing. I will go as I am." Now you can tell how that's going to work out. You know what happens. Oh, the king falls for her madly in love and makes her the queen. This is where we go, Now it came to pass that cousin Mordecai was a minor official in the court at the time. And during his business, he overhears two other officials plotting to assassinate the king. So he tells Esther, and she warns the king. And the king is thrilled. He's thrilled with this information. And he manages to avoid the whole assassination. And he writes it down in his book of records, which is kind of like his journal. Like, today Mordecai sent me a warning through Queen Esther that I was about to be assassinated. He writes it all down. That's how it is. And, and they would have all have lived happily ever after if it hadn't been for Haman, the villain. When the story is told in temple, often people hiss or make noise about Haman. Some rabbis are questioning the practice. They're questioning whether it is appropriate to practice hatred even for Haman. I mean, it's fascinating. So let's hold off the hissing until the rabbis tell us what to do. He's a high court official, the vizier to the king. His ego is way out of control. He makes it so that everybody must bow down before him as he walks past. But guess who won't do that? Mordecai won't do that. He won't do that for very good reasons. First of all, it's the first law. You won't bow down to anything other than the divine. And secondly, well, this is complicated, but Haman is an Agagite, which belongs to a nation of people, and between the Jews and the Agagites, there's bad blood. Has to do with a long history of mutual aggression. Anyway, it really bugs Haman, he festers on it. I just want to get rid of Mordecai. And then it comes to him, I'm not just going to get rid of Mordecai. I'm going to destroy all the Jews. And this is his plan. He goes to the king and he says, did you know that there are a people among your people dispersed across the provinces who have their own ways that are not like us? And the king says, yeah, well, sure, I guess. And he says, well, and did you know that they follow their own laws? And the king, yeah, I guess. He said, and did you know that they put their laws above your laws? And the king says, well, it happens. So Haman says, you know what, you need to get rid of these people because that's going to cause trouble in the kingdom, and I will fund it. I will deposit a huge amount of gold into the royal coffers. And now he's got the king's attention. The king's, he's bribing him. The birth of special interest. So the king says, all right. And the king sets out a decree, and he sends it to all the corners of the earth. And the decree is that on such and such a day, Jews may be murdered. Not only that, as an added incentive, their property may be taken. Well, let's recap. Are you still with me? Number one, a decree by a king cannot be revoked, cannot be changed. Number two, Queen Esther did not reveal that she is. And now everyone across the kingdom is super excited about slaughtering Jews and taking their property. Whoa, so now we have got a shift of dynamic over here. Mordecai and Haman. Well, what to do? Mordecai sends a copy of the edict to Esther with a note. It says, go to the king and beg for your people. And Esther sends a polite note back. She says, well, all the king's servants know that you don't just walk into the king's presence without being summoned. It's instant death. And I personally haven't been summoned for 30 days. So if I go into his presence without being called upon, it's going to be instant death for me. Unless, of course, he extends his royal scepter. I know. And Mordecai, cousin Mordecai, he sends back to her what might be called a pat on the back and a kick in the pants. Goes like this. First, the kick in the pants says, don't imagine that because you're in the palace that you, among all the Jews, will be spared. Ouch. Two, a sort of pat on the back. He says, and even if you remain silent, help will arise from somewhere else. You may perish, but help will come. Wow. And then the challenge. He says, who knows whether you have come to this place, this position of royalty, for such a time as this? Oh, and that's what changed her heart. Not the threat, but the call to higher consciousness. And she wrote back and she said, fine, go assemble all the Jews among the people throughout the city, gather them together and pray with me and fast with me. And then I will go into the king's presence, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. I love that part of the story. Yeah, no. It reminds me, maybe I have the privilege I have, you, so that I can do what I can do for the world. as if life has prepared us for that moment. This epic moment in time she was prepared for. Maybe you too. Think of it. Think of what you and I can do for this world because of the position and privilege we have. Think of the good we can do that others cannot do for themselves. So, she decides to do her spiritual work first. Big clue. Does her spiritual work first. And I love that she asked for support from her spiritual community. Have them fast with me. Fasting is a symbol of suspending everything else and then turning your attention entirely to the divine. And it reminds me that here at the center, a group of meditators and prayers, they get together every month on the last day of the month to suspend everything and turn their attention to peace on behalf of all sentient beings. And since this is the last day of the month, it's tonight, 7 p.m., and you're invited. Yeah. Now, she says, I'm going to do my spiritual work first. You know why I pause for that is because sometimes I do the opposite. I act first, then I'll pray to fix up the mess I made. I'll get into activity first, then I'll contemplate. What does it mean? No, she's going to do her spiritual first, get her prayer on. And the way she prays, I notice she doesn't say, I will do my prayer work and then I am assured success. No, she doesn't say that. She doesn't say, I'm going to get my prayer on and then I won't perish. She doesn't say that. She doesn't say, if I pray, I'll get what I want. She doesn't say that. She says, I'm praying for the courage and the strength to do what is mine to do, even though the outcome is uncertain and I'm walking on the razor's edge. Have you ever known that place? There's this thing you got to do. You got to do it, and you're willing to do it. It's just that it's frightening. And you'd like a little assurance that you'll survive it. A memo from the divine would be great, And then we get into trying to control the outcome. When what we ought to do is to abandon everything else and turn our attention entirely to the divine and pray for the courage and the strength and the self-awareness to do the right thing for the common good. Then, when she was ready, all prayed up, she put on her royal robes. That is a symbol of stepping into her authority. She stepped into her authority and she headed for the throne room, the hall of 100 pillars. Oh, she knew she was putting her life on the line. And the only passage that led to the throne room, it was lined end to end with idols. Idols representing the things that distract us, that tempt us, that cause us to doubt ourselves. And as she's walking, click, 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 all these idols whittling away her resolve. And it gets to her, to the point where she's at the door of the throne room and her resolve falters. And she says the words that the whole Jewish and Christian world know so well at this time of the year. She says, my God, why have you forsaken me? I know that place. You're dealing with something big, and the stakes are high, and you've got to face it. You've got your prayer on, you've put on your royal robes, and you've walked right up to the door only to realize it's not the end, it's the beginning. Now is when the real courage is needed. After you've been through a long path of doubt, now the courage is called for to walk the razor's edge. Now picture the scene in the throne room. In the balcony are hundreds of archers on guard because they know nobody can walk up to the king unannounced. And there is a point of no return. So as she walks, the archers lift up their bows and arrows and arm them because they know the minute she steps over that line, she will die. And as she's about to take the last step, as if from the corner of his eye, the king raises the golden scepter to stop them. And he says, "My queen, what is your petition? And even if it costs up to half of the kingdom, I will grant it." And you can feel everybody go, and she says, "My lord, if it pleases you, I would like you to come to lunch, and I will tell you my petition there. And by the way, bring Haman with you." Ooh. Ooh. Now look, Haman was there, and he was like, "Oh my God, I've arrived. The queen's invited me to lunch. Oh my God, that is so amazing." He's so puffed up. You know, when the ego mistakenly identifies itself as the center of the universe? You know that point? Have you ever done that? I've done that. When I was a brand new minister and I was in a new community, I thought everything was about me. I remember I was shopping and I was at the produce stand shopping, and somebody a few stands down went, and they recognized me, and I went, and she went, "No, not you." She was waving at her friend. Haman was ecstatic with the invitation. He goes home and he tells his wife, he says, "You know, I would be so happy. I could be so happy if it just wasn't for Mordecai. It's really getting into me." And she says, "Honey, don't worry. You know that edict is coming, that day is coming when you'll be able to kill him. So why don't you build a gallows and put his name on it? Then you can hang him yourself." And he's like, "Excellent idea. How to channel negative energy. Awesome." He builds the gallows. You know, it's not the first time that Haman's ego mistakenly identifies himself as being amazing. Not the first time. There's this one time when the king couldn't sleep at night. And so he thought, I'll do some reading. And he calls for the book of records. You know, remember his journal? Remember what he wrote in the journal? "On such and such a day, Mordecai sent a warning to me through Esther, and then I didn't get assassinated." And he says, "That was an awesome experience. What did we do to reward Mordecai?" And they're like, "Nothing." He said, "Well, that's not good. We should do something really amazing because, he saved my life." And the king says, "You know who would know what to do? Haman would know what to do." So he says, "Is Haman still in the palace?" And they say, "Yeah." So go fetch him. And Haman comes in, and the king says, "Haman, what should be done for the man the king wishes to honor above all else?" Oh, Haman thinks it's him. Oh, he lays it on thick, you know. He says, "Oh, you should dress him in the king's royal robes. You should put a crown on his head like the king wears. You should put him on the king's best horse, and you should have him paraded all across the town so that people can pay homage to him." And the king says, "That is an excellent idea. Make it so." He makes Haman do it for Mordecai. Anyway, fast forward to the lunch with Queen Esther and Haman and the king. They're sitting and they're having lunch. And the king says, "My queen, what is your petition?" Can you feel it in the air? And she breathes in and she says, "My petition is my life. Give me my life. For it has been decreed that on such a date that I and all of my people shall be killed and our property taken." And the king say, "What?" And it's like it all is downloaded into his awareness what's happened. And to maintain his composure, he gets up and he walks out onto the balcony for a moment. And Haman knows he's done. And he thinks the only way out is to appeal to the queen. And he throws himself at her feet, at which point the king walks back into the room and says, "And now you're molesting the queen?" And the guards grab him. And guess what they do? They hang him on the gallows that he built for Mordecai. Cause and effect, you know. Not the end. Because what about that edict that the king put out that Jews should die? He can't revoke it. So he makes another one. He sends out to every corner of the earth that on such and such a date, the same day, that the Jews of the empire are empowered and encouraged to protect themselves with whatever means necessary. In other words, sending a very clear message to the kingdom that the king has changed his mind. Now, stories such as these contain characters who all live in us. At one time or another, Haman is running about in us, seeking glory and wrongly identifying ourselves as the middle of the universe at the expense of others. At other times, Mordecai can be out and about, directing things from behind the scenes, intending good, sometimes being manipulative. At other times, the king is alive in us like a spoiled brat, not knowing how to deal with no. But there is also in us a complex Queen Vashti when, despite our failings, we are still unwilling to buckle to injustice. And there is also within us Queen Esther during those times when, despite our fears, we act with courage, especially on behalf of those who cannot act for themselves. I invite you to breathe in with me now. And sigh as you let your eyes close, as we take a moment to turn within and acknowledge that in the infinity of life, where I am right now, where we are, the full living Spirit, the Holy Spirit, is present, saturating our awareness, infusing us with the knowledge of our divinity and our shared heritage in God, and causing us to remember the truth of our being. I celebrate this and accept it for me and for all. And I let it be. And with conviction then we say together, and so it is.